Hello, I'm Sophia Lou and welcome to my channel.
Hello guys and welcome to this week's video. This week I'm taking a piece from a sketchbook that I really liked and I'm simply redoing it. And I thought I'd give my thoughts on working with limited palettes and how I feel about working with them and whether or not I think they actually benefit you. If you haven't seen the sketchbook tour, I will leave a link in the top left hand corner and a link down below so that you can totally check it out. It's one of my least favourite sketchbooks, but it's a sketchbook tour that nevertheless that I think is really important to show. For this piece I'm using 3 Winsor & Newton colours, so I'm using the colours Blossom, Pastel Blue and Bluebell. I'm also using some Unipin fine liners as well as a WH Smith pencil to build up texture. I hesitate to call this a free marker challenge because I'm using pencil, crayon to build up texture, and I'm also using white gel pen a little bit just to bring out some white areas. But I think it's also really important to show yourself how you can work with a limited palette. Now, if you are new to my channel and you're not entirely sure or a regular, I am obsessed with working with limited palettes. I find that limiting your equipment and what you are doing really helps you not have a better understanding of colour, but a better understanding not only how your markers work, but how you can blend in specific ranges. Now these colours are all very light. The only warm-ish tone is this Blossom tone, which creates a really interesting effect against with the blue, which is a very cold tone, and this purpley blue is also quite a cold tone as well. The WH Smith pencil, which is like almost like a pinky purple colour, almost magenta in a way, helps build up that warm tone a bit more and offset all the cool palette against each other. Not only does this really help to build up your illustration, but you'll notice that I mainly focus the fine liners in the central of where the eyes are and in the center of the illustration. This is because this helps build up this intense stare in the middle without the lines being too harsh. I sometimes really do enjoy working with pencils or pencil crayons or coloured pencils, however you call it in your area of where you live. I find that it helps build a really soft illustration, and that's what I was kind of going for this. Prints and that are available on my Redbubble store of this if you are interested in checking that out. I'll leave a link for that for you to check that out as well. So why is working with limited palettes so important, and what can it teach us about learning with colour? Well, limited palettes are sort of you restricting yourself with what you do. Now this is a pastel tone palette, so it works really well because all the colours are really soft and work well with each other. If you really want a good tonal range, it's really good to try and work with different tones, to try and restrict yourself in certain ways to see how you and your work reacts to certain stuff. So I personally tend to steer from quite harsh or graphic tonal work, but learning that and applying it to my work is also beneficial. So before I started working with colour, I would mainly work with line work, and line work was something that I would always do. I'd always concentrate on doing quite a graphical approach to my colouring instead of a softer, more soft tonal range with my colouring. Since forcing myself to work with limited palettes and using these limited palette challenges, it's also really helpful to not only broaden your horizon with colour, but help you understand of what works with your illustrations and what won't work with your illustration. I find that sometimes you have a very limited tonal range if you tend to keep to the same colours again and again. It's good to broaden your horizons and try out different things to see if you can try out a palette that won't necessarily work for you. For example, I'm going to do another illustration in the future where I tend to stick to very warm tones. And if you have been a follower of mine for a long time, you know that I've done a warm palette and a cool palette challenge before, where you stick to yourself for those colours in that tonal range. You'll find that sometimes your work can come out very different. Colour is very important to an illustration. A colour can tell you whether or not an illustration is meant to portray an evil character or meant to portray a sad character. Colour is so important to your whole basis of your illustration and can really change a feeling about a whole illustration altogether. I think when you're thinking about colour, it can be quite difficult to get this sort of like blindness of, oh, everything is the sort of the same colour palette. And I know artists who have dabbled in lots of different colour palettes and now stick to a certain colour palette in everything they use. I tend to use a lot of earthy tones in my drawings because of what I'm trying to achieve with my drawings. I'm trying to go for very earth tones, but I find that by branching out and trying something that I wouldn't normally do, I'm learning a lot more about colour and understanding. This is why limited colour palette challenges are so important, to not only help development in your work, but to help you understand what works and what doesn't work for you. Now you can try some very contrasting and very harsh colours. The reason why this colour palette works so well together is because all these tonal ranges are very soft in colour. Now if I had a very harsh purple with this very soft pink and like almost like a greeny blue, it kind of would not work as well, and the reason being is that purple would be too harsh for that, but a deeper purple in comparison to this very light bluey purple that we've got here would still work within the constraints of this illustration. You would just get a different feel to the overall illustration, which gives it a sort of like a push that you wouldn't normally do. As I said earlier, I never really used to work with colour, and I kind of used to be afraid of using colour in illustration to see how it would go. But I've come to a sort of mindset with my work that sometimes ideas don't work, and that is completely okay. Not everything is going to work within an illustration, and sometimes it's good for you to try out something that doesn't work, to be able to go back and go, okay, this didn't work because of X, Y, and Z. Now this illustration for me, it works. There are stuff that I would improve. I personally would have gone for a bluer tone than this pastel blue. If I was to go back and change the colour scheme again, I would go for a more richer blue tone and a more richer purple tone that would contrast really well against this very pale pink and would create a really beautiful limited parts of the illustration. There are parts that you can always improve on when it comes to illustration, but at the same time, you're not going to know if something doesn't work until you actually try it. So why should you work in limited colour palettes? As I said, there's a fantastic learning curve from doing this. You can find out colours that you would not normally work with and try out different things. It's really good to try out these limited colour palette challenges because not only are you challenging yourself, but you're using stuff that you would not normally do. I really like these challenges that come out. For example, I really enjoyed using only the colour green in one of my challenges a while ago. I really enjoyed doing that. I really enjoyed my warm colour palette, my cool colour palette challenges, the tertiary, the secondary, the primary, the pastel, the sepia, the monochrome. Like, these challenges are fantastic, not only to enhance your skills, but for you to try out something that you wouldn't normally learn. And I have never done, say, a 6 marker challenge before, and I think that could be quite interesting to see how your limited palette would work within the constraints of those colours. Now, if you are going to do a colour palette challenge, sometimes it's really helpful if you're going for a darker palette, you want a nice mid-tone to go in between that. Sometimes when you have quite a soft tone and quite a dark tone together and you don't have something in between, it can almost be quite harsh and graphical, the colouring that you are doing, because you're trying to blend to get those in between. A colour palette challenge works really, really well when you have a good amount of colour range in between the colours, and sometimes those colours aren't going to work. If they don't work for you, that's absolutely fine. What doesn't work for you is going to work for someone else, and that is okay. It's okay to sometimes push yourself out of your boundaries and do something that you wouldn't normally do, and I challenge you guys to do that. Try a colour palette that you would not normally do and see how that works for you. For example, I'm going to try one of those I colour with everything that I've got, and I'm going to choose a colour that I absolutely detest colouring with, and I cannot stand colouring with the colour yellow. I want to see how that turns out. I also really can't stand colouring with the oranges and reds. I find them really difficult to work with. I think it's very interesting for you to take a palette that you would not normally work with and see how it works for you. If you're normally quite a graphical and you colour with darker colours, try colouring with lighter colours, see how that goes. If you never colour with dark colours, try it out. You don't know if something doesn't work until you try, and I think it's really important that we push ourselves, not only as illustrators, but it's also important to push yourself to see if you can work within the constraints of a specific colour palette. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I really did enjoy doing this illustration. It was really nice to take something from my sketchbook, which I had a quick idea, and enhance it and really work well. I love this color palette. It's one of my all-time favorites. And if you guys want to try something with a similar color scheme, I'd love to see that. Make sure to tag me on Instagram and or Twitter if you do. For those who don't know, I'm currently doing a summer art challenge. If you are not sure what it is, I would possibly check out my Instagram and or Twitter to see what it is. It's basically a 31-day picture challenge with a prompt, and you can try that out. I'm a little bit behind myself, but I'm hoping to catch up and share some of your amazing illustrations that you guys have been doing. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you're new, maybe like, comment or subscribe. But as always, folks, stay creative.